right, so when we are putting the skeleton together, we need to bear in mind that before we bind it to our geometry, we do want these axes to be facing in the direction that we would want to be able to animate them. We need to be thinking about that as we're making the skeleton. So generally speaking, you want your Z rotation to be this rotation, the left and right kind of like around, and that works the same way with you know, arms and clavicles and stuff like that. Anything that's kind of doing this left to right from when you're facing up is what you want your Z axis to do. Your Y axis should be a little bit more like this, like you're pivoting. And then the X one, you want to be like you're bending forward. So generally speaking, that's the way you want these things to be aligned. And so what I'm going to do is just go through each of these bones one at a time to make sure that that's happening. So this is our pivot, that's perfect. This is our bend forward, and then this is our rotate. So we've got it on this enable axis mode. I'm just going to go up the line here. It looks like those are all correct now. You can just adjust these if you want, or you can try to do what's called a joint align tool, which if I click this and I do a joint align tool from the waist, I can have the axis from the joint, the direction of the bone, with the up axis being, let's call it Z for now, with the up direction being the object axis, and align with children. Press align, and right now that looks like it set it up exactly the way I wanted it to, except for the chest. So we'll just adjust that one right now. Got to rotate it a little bit, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to line up with the clavicle, and that's not really what we want. We want it to be lined up with itself in the world. So the clavicle is also not correct, because we actually need this to rotate and go this direction. So let's do that, but in a second. We'll go through the neck, head, and head tip. Yes, these are all correctly aligned now. So now let's go back to the clavicle. And the direction that we want this to be able to rotate is similar, except 90 degrees this direction, so that when we bend it up and down, it's this one. If we pivot, you know, rotate it on itself, it's this Y axis, and then the Z axis rotates it outward. And now what we can do is we can just start with the clavicle, go back to that the joint align tool, axis from joint, direction bone, with the up axis being none, and the up direction being the object axis, and only have the children and not aligned with previous. If we click this, it should have gone down the line on our clavicle. We'll just get our rotate tool up again, shoulder. All right, so once again, the direction that I want these blue and red bands and green bands to face is important for how we're going to animate this character. Anytime I want the arm to rotate out from itself, I want it to be along the blue axis. So that's just like what we did with this chest through here. So I want the blue axis to actually be along the right and left side. And I want this red axis to be the kind of up and down motion. And anytime we want to just rotate the arm like this on its own axis, that's this green band. So that's what we want to do, is just make sure that this blue line is kind of facing us, the green line is facing around it, and this red line is going down this direction. It doesn't necessarily matter that much which direction these are all facing, because once you get into animation, so this needs to be like this, just to be consistent with the bone previous to it. And just make sure we've got a green one on the top going around this way, the red one's going this way, the blue one's this way, green one, red, and blue. That's perfect. Okay, so now we should be actually pretty good on all of these, except it looks like blue is turning this one. But as long as these are all kind of doing the same thing, it looks like they are, we can just leave those as is. I want to make sure I name these correctly though. So this is the left pinky 01, pinky 02, pinky, left pinky 03, and left pinky tip. All right, you've stuck with me so far. Let's go down and do this hip into the feet. This will not take long. And we're almost there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to be really close to binding this to the geometry and just seeing how it bends and, you know, getting excited about animating. So let's get on this view once more. Let's get our joint tool out. We're going to create from the root instead of from the waist. From the waist, what we can do now is start to build out the hip all the way down to the feet joints. So let's, from the hip joint, the waist I should say, so control click, making sure you're on the left side. Looks like I am. That's where our hip will be. We'll go down to the knee. And then this last joint we can switch over to our right camera view. Go down to our heel right about here, the toe, and the tip. So this should be good. And let's just make sure these are lined up. We can just move this over just a little bit. So it's nice and centered up. And what we need to do from the front view is just make sure once again that our joints are lined up the way that we want them. So if we rotate from the world axis, you see if you switch to world axis, you can even see the effects of what the world axis and the, you know, the object axis are doing. The waist axis is already switched on me, and I don't really want that. I kind of want it to be back where it was. So we're going to go to 90 degrees. Not 90 degrees, looks like about 40. And just make sure that this is facing me, this is facing kind of the pivot, and then this is going to be that rotation from the waist. We'll call this our left hip. Go down the line here and just name these joints. And left tip. Okay, so this, once again, I'd like this to be more like what the world axis is. So I'm going to try that mirror, or try that joint align tool once more. From joint to bone, up axis is, let's see if Z works. Yes, it does. So clicking Z on the up axis worked, and it aligned all the joints down the line as well. This is actually exactly what we want on this one as well. We want this to be able to turn from this Z axis like this. I wanted this to be a little bit more lined up though, so I'm gonna turn it just a little. Always good to turn these where you want them before you press bind. But I will show you how to fix it if you do somehow something doesn't quite line up the way that you want it to. You can change this later without affecting your geometry. So don't worry too much about alignment, even though I worried for a very long time about alignment. You don't need to worry too much about alignment, but it is important when you're animating to have a consistent way that your joints are facing so that when you rotate something, it doesn't surprise you that it's rotating the wrong direction. But yeah, if it's your first time rigging, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about alignment, but just know that it's an important thing, and if you learn how to do it, it's going to help you in the future. So now that we have our whole left side planned out and our skeleton is made, we can actually mirror this whole joint chain to the left, from the left to the right. Let's start with the left hip, and we're going to use this mirror tool, and we'll just do, right now it's just going to change the, it's going to mirror it over from the left to the right, and what we want to do is just change the naming from L to R. Now let's go back to our options. Direction is world, that's good, and then click on this tool tab. It asks you if you want to do the children, and yes we do, so let's just click mirror. And just like that, it has changed it from the left to the right. It's lined it up exactly where we would want it on this side, and everything is aligned appropriately. Let's do the same thing with this left clavicle all the way down. We're just going to click that mirror tool and click mirror. It should have just made an entire chain of the right clavicle all the way through the fingers. Let's just double check. Get close here. Everything looks really good. So we are just about ready to bind this to our geometry. If you're ready, I'm ready. The moment of truth. This is where we're going to bind our skeleton to our geometry. and let's see where is that? It's right here. It's grayed out right now because it knows we're not ready. But if we click on this with our middle mouse button, it will grab the entire joint chain, and we are going to go to our woman body, hit command click on that, so we can just grab the geometry right there instead of everything. We just want to bind it to this actual polygonal geometry. And now it's here, it's telling us we can bind it. So let's do it. We clicked bind. Now all of these joints are bound to the geometry. Let's just see how we did. So I'm going to turn off our lines so we can see it a little better. If we start to move this, that's moving, but it's not actually moving the spine with it. Oh, you know what? I have I have the axis enabled. So let's go back in and let's rotate this. Okay, that's actually fine. We want that because we're going to be adding some IK chains to this. One thing I also forgot to do is I forgot to bind the hips to the legs. So let's just grab the right and left hips. You know what? We're actually going to bind the entire skeleton to this legs geometry as well. So you might think that because we have two separate pieces of geometry, you might just be able to bind just the waist through the hips down to the legs. And maybe that is that could be a good idea, but in my case, what I've found is that when I do all the binding all together at the same time with all of the skeleton and try to bind it to each set of geometry, what I'll find is that the colors of the weights are the same from one bind to the next. And so if I go into a weight tool and I see that the waist is actually this red color, I kind of want that to be red on the other pieces of geometry as well. So actually, you know what? We'll try this and we'll see if it works the way I think it will. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the entire chain once more with that middle mouse button right here at the top of waist, and then I'm going to control click or command click, I guess, on this legs and click bind. And now everything's bound to that skeleton. So now if I do waist, I rotate it, the entire skeleton goes with it. That's okay that these legs and everything's rotating with it because we're going to be adding IK chains to this. But now if I do this, it's actually not too bad. Hard to tell how much this is. Yeah, so we've got some clipping that's happening here, but this can all be solved with some weight painting. Just want to see how good a job we did on this. So this is particularly good. Not too great yet, so we can do that we can weight paint that stuff. Let's just check out our fingers. Sometimes these are great, and it's like, oh, perfect. We don't need to do anything else to this. I'm going to go to the left pinky, though, which is up here. Yeah, really not bad. It's not pulling any of the weights from any of these other pieces. It's really kind of nice. Look at that. So there's not a lot of weight painting we're going to have to do through the hands, which is a joyous treat to find out. Let's just see how we're doing on the wrist. This could use a little bit of love, so we're just going to go in and kind of smooth that out. The elbow. This could use a little bit of attention. Just kind of smoothing this out as well. And let's see how we're doing on shoulders. So when you pull this up, oftentimes what will happen is this will start to pull some of the chest, and this is why we have to do some weight painting on this area. Yeah, clavicle, chest. This whole area usually needs the most attention, so that's what we're going to spend our time on. But, not too bad for our first bind to our skeleton. So at this point, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and bring our head elements back in, because I do want to see how this is going to affect this scarf. So let's bring the head elements back in, and we'll go ahead and parent that here. We'll have this follow the neck base, and we'll turn on the infinity scarf once more. Let's just see what happens if we start rotating this. Yeah, you know, I think this is going to be okay. To have this clavicle here, it's not really going through the infinity scarf too badly, so I don't think we need to rig or bind the infinity scarf. Could be nice to have it move a little bit, so maybe, you know, it's something I can think about as we're looking at rigging this whole body together. So